Good morning, guys. We are here to continue quadratic equation, which is also termed as algebraic process. Okay. Quadratic equation part 5. For this part, I will want you to pay a close attention to some things that you're supposed to be aware of. Okay, when solving quadratic equation. Like I said, there are some notes that I've mentioned like in either part one, part two, or part three, or part four. Okay, and then want to continue with the notes. Though in mathematics, nobody will ask you what are the three methods you will use to solve quadratic equation, but it's good for you to at least be aware of it. Okay, so quadratic equation can be solved using three methods. One is factorization, which is the one we've treated so far. Okay, factorization. And if you notice over the weekend, I dropped some questions, in past questions that are related to factorization. They are so simple. Okay, we can still come back to that better later. Then we also have completing the square method. Then we also have quadratic formula, which we terms as almighty formula. We've known that for a very long time. Almighty formula, almighty formula. But there's nothing like almighty formula. You understand? But we call it quadratic formula. Now we've done the first one, which is factorization. We are moving to the second one, and this second one, most times you can see it in theory. You can also see it in objective. Okay, but you can see it in theory because I could remember during my own time, either GC or NECO or I think one of those exams, it came out in the theoretical part. You understand? They want us to using the completing the square method, solve the following quadratic equation or solve the quadratic equation. So these are the statements you will see when using the second method, completing the square. Using the second method, the usual statements, what must be added to this expression to make it a perfect square? Okay? Or you can also see not factorizable. There are some expression, quadratic equation that will be given to you that you cannot factorize it. So what is expected you to use? You can use completing the square method, or you can also use quadratic formula. You understand? So using the completing the square method, so sometimes they will not mention it. But you will just notice that while you are trying to factorize it, you cannot factorize it. It's not jiving. So all you just need to do is just to say, okay, let me use another method since factorization is not working. So another way we can explain this second method, which I mentioned that is very key, is using an example. Okay, if you look at it now, what must be added to the following to make it a perfect square? This is the first one, m squared minus 8m. We also have other examples that I've shown here, including this number 6. I intentionally put this number 6 for you to see that there are some expression you cannot factorize. Okay, if you know that you cannot factorize, all you just need to do is just to use other method, which is either completing the square method or quadratic formula. So let's just um, dwell on number 1, which is m squared minus 8m. Note, in a normal expression, normal quadratic equation expression, you see it like this. But in this case, you didn't see anything like that. So let's assume we have this as squared minus bx, let's say plus bx plus c equals 0. This is a normal expression for a quadratic equation, which is similar to what we have here, though the sign can change. So I'm just using this one as an example. This is how it's supposed to be. Okay. Now, if they now ask us what must be added to this following to make it a perfect square, the question you need to ask yourself is, what is perfect square? Okay. What is perfect square? Perfect square means what you can times 2 times that you can find the square root. Like example, you can have square root of 4 is a perfect square. It means this one is the same thing as 2 times 2. Okay, 2 times 2. You understand? So square root of 4 is the same thing as what? 2. You understand? So that's what we call perfect square. Let's say square root of 9. Square root of 9 is the same thing as what? 3 times what? 3, which is square root of, let's say this one is what? 3, right? So it's because it's a perfect square. You can times it, what you can add together. So it means at the end of the day, I can have, I can have maybe a perfect square, 2 times 2, 2 square. This one is the same thing as square root of 2 square. This one is also the same thing as square root of 3 square. So it's because it's a perfect square. Now, in this case, we'll now fall back. This is just for us to be aware. I'm just trying to introduce it so that it will be very clear. Now, in this case now, I now need to introduce something. I can now say in 1, let's say let k be added to 1 to make it a perfect square. To make it a perfect square. Okay, so it means that I'll say that implies m square minus 8m. Okay, so plus k. Okay, m square minus 8m plus k equals, and don't forget, I made mention of square. Because we're dealing with perfect square, it means I need to add something. What's the coefficient here? M. Let's say m plus something will make this one to a perfect square. Let me just say b, all square. That is it. So it means that I must add something to this to make it a perfect square. And for me to get a perfect square, it means I must square something, for me to get a perfect square. Because if I want to do this now, if you look at this very well, if you look at this, these two here, if I change this square root, I can change it to power half. Half the 2 times 1 over 2. I've mentioned it before. 2 here, 1, 2 here, can cancel it. Okay? So the same thing has to repeat itself here, which is very, very important. Now, if you look at this very well, since I've introduced this from above, then we can just clean this part. We can clean this part because of space. So we can clean that part because of space. So it means that at the end of the day, we can at the end of the day we can see this here. So now there's what we call difference of 2 square. There's what we call difference of 2 square. So it means that m square minus 8m plus k is the same thing as this one, the same thing as m plus b, m plus b. Okay, I'm writing it 2 times, just like 2, like this, 2 times 2, as mentioned above, 3 times 3. I'm also writing it 2 times because it's power 2 here. Okay, perfect square. Don't forget perfect square. So for us to get a perfect square, you must trace it by power of 2. So it means at the end of the day, I can have m square minus 8m plus k equals, now m times m square, m times b plus mb. Don't forget, I've told you, anything on the right hand side is the owner of this sign. So if you look at this very well, this plus, the owner of this plus is b. So that's why I'm having m times b is this. So the same thing, b times m will give us what? mb. Okay, b times b will give us what? b square. Very simple. Okay, that's difference of 2 square. M times m square, m times b, mb, b times mb, b times b square. So now what we do here is that because it's completing the square method, we can now compare coefficients. What do we mean by coefficients? The coefficient in this question is what? M. Coefficient can be A, it can be B, it can be C, it can be D. Now, the coefficient in this assumption that I did here is what? A. The coefficient is A. Oh, sorry, the coefficient is what? X. Okay. In this case now, the coefficient is what? M. And don't forget, in this question now, the coefficient is what? V. In this question, the coefficient is what? U. So the coefficient can be any alphabet. Okay. So now I can compare m square, m square. I can compare minus 8m. Okay, now don't forget this one is the same thing as m square minus 8m plus k equals m square plus m plus m. Don't forget mb, mb. So 1 plus 1 is the same thing as what? 2mb plus what? B square. So now I can continue this here. I can continue it here. So which means that I can have m square minus 8m plus k equals m square plus 2mb plus b square. Now, that is from here. I'm taking it up here because of space. Now, if you look at it, I can compare this one with this one. This go with this. I can compare it. So, and I can also compare this one with this one because it has, this one has m squared, this one has m squared. That is what they mean by completing the square method. Now, this one has no coefficient at all. I can compare it. Do you see it now? So, I can compare m squared and m squared. I can compare minus 8m squared minus 8m to 2mb because it has only m. But this one has no m at all, has no coefficient. I can compare them. So it means that that implies that m squared equals what? M squared. That one will cancel each other. Okay? That one will cancel. Then minus 8m equals plus 2mb. Okay? So now this implies that m, if I divide both sides by m, divide both sides by m, divide both sides by m will cancel m will cancel m. So that implies I can have minus 8 equals what? 2b. It means that my b will now be minus 8 over what? 2, which b is equal to what? Minus 4. Very simple. What am I doing? I'm comparing the coefficients. The coefficients. What's the coefficient on this side? M square, m square. I can compare together. So the second coefficient, which is minus 8m to what? Plus 2mb. So I divide both sides by m. I can now have this. B is equal to 4. So, and don't forget the last one, which is what? K equals b square. And don't forget, I've gotten my b here. So it means I can substitute. I can say, okay, this is 2. I can say 3. I can say, here, I can continue this here. Put 2 in what? In 3. So it means that my k will now be what? Minus 4 all squared. So at the end of the day, my what is what? That's minus 4 times minus 4. And that will give us what? Minus times minus plus 4 times 4. That's what? 16. So it means the value that will make that equation, which is this equation here, the value that will make this equation a perfect square is the what? Is 16. That is the meaning. There are shorter methods we can use here for jam cases and all those things. So, but in case it comes out in a theoretical path, okay, for O level, it means that you need to follow this method. It's very simple, okay? All you just need to do, introduce a particular alphabet that will be added to the equation to make it a perfect square, okay? But after you introduce it, at the end of the day, then you can just square it. You can just square it, and so like I said, so this is very simple. So what I would do here is just to ensure that we solve as many questions as possible. Okay. so that we can get more clarity on how, on how we can use completing the square method. And I've told you, don't forget, it's very simple. In JAM standard, we don't really waste much time in JAM standard. Whenever they ask you questions like this, so don't forget it. I can conclude this. Let me conclude this now. You now say, therefore, okay? You now say, therefore, um, m square minus 8m. What is my k? The value of k is b square, which is what? 16 plus 16 equals, what is the value here? That is, I have m. What is my b? My b is equal to what? Minus 4. Minus 4 or what? Square. So that is the meaning. So it means that for me to make this equation a perfect square, I must add what? 16 to it. Okay? If you expand this, you will get this. That is the meaning. So it's very key. All you just need to note is that anytime they ask you, what can you add to this equation to make it a perfect square? Find an alphabet that you can use. It's not compulsory that it's k. It can be x. It can, but it should be different from the coefficient. Okay, so that you won't model things up. So after you do that, you do the same thing here. For us to get a perfect square, I've given you an example here. 3 square, 2 square. All you just need to do, the coefficient that you're using here, m plus, then you have your any alphabet that you want to use, b square. That is, a value must be here, and that value that's supposed to be here is what? Minus 4. So if you expand this difference of 2 square, write it 2 times and expand it like the way I expand this one, you will get the same answer as this. So but in JAM standard, in JAM standard, in JAM standard, if calculator is not involved and they ask you this the same question, that issue, what value can you add? What you just need to do, you find first, you find the half of the coefficient of s, find the half of the coefficient in the question. Find the half, the coefficient in the question. Okay. So when you find the half of the coefficient in the question, number two, you square it. You square the result. Square the result in one above. You square the result in one above. So when you square the result in one above, the third step, add it to both sides. Or what you can do is that you can add it to the equation. Okay, so what we can now do here is that it's very simple. If we look at the same question here, I'm using this question the same for JAM standard now. If you look at the same question, let's say we have m squared minus 8m. Find the half of the coefficient in the question. What's the coefficient in the question? The coefficient is what? The coefficient is m. Okay, now the coefficient, find the coefficient in the question. The coefficient is what? Find the half of the coefficient in the question. So the coefficient is what? M. Now, but in this case of the coefficient in the question, which is with no power 2, with no power, most times with no power. Now, the coefficient in the question with no power is minus 8. For one above, which is this, is what? Minus 8. Okay. Now, for number 2 here, we said square the result of find the half. Okay, the first one said we should find the half. The coefficient is minus 8, and they said we should find the half. Half of it, that's times half, which is what? Minus 4. So for number 2 here, they said we should square the result. That's minus 4 times minus 4, which is the same thing as minus 4 all square. Okay. Now, they now said we should add the result to both sides. Don't forget, I made mention of minus 8m plus what? K equals m plus b all square to make it a perfect square. So I've done the first one. Find the half of the coefficient of m with no power. M here has no power. What is the half? Minus 4. Now, the Instruction of number 2 said square the result in one above. Minus 4 times minus 4. Okay, that's square. Then it means that add it to both sides. So at the end of the day, it means that I will have m squared minus 8m. So here, if you look at it very well, what is my k? My k here, find the half of the coefficient of x, which is what? 16. So, and here it will be what? Minus 4 or what? Or square. So, which is also still the same thing. So, don't forget this three method. Find the half of the coefficient of s with no power, square the result, and add it to both sides. So, it's very, very simple. So, please continue to like, continue to share, and continue to, you know, continue to, you know, share with others so that other people can also benefit from it. So we'll still solve another questions as many as possible under this particular topic so that to make it more clear and easy for us to learn. Thank you very much.